we're going to be talking about the business analyst role in cybersecurity. Our guest today is Terry Baresh, also known as the Cybersecurity Business Analyst. He's also a speaker, trainer, and coach in business analysis with a specialization in cybersecurity as well as data management. Terry, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
Dr. White, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Look forward
Absolutely.
to a conversation around cybersecurity and business analysis.
So, Terry, I like to start off with defining things because people typically have different perceptions or understanding of words that we hear all of the time. So, from your perspective, how would you define cybersecurity specifically in the context of business?
I love that we start out by putting the assumptions on the table and defining the terms. I know cybersecurity is oftentimes thought of as a technical domain and specifically around protecting network systems and assets. I think cybersecurity is much broader than that. And I think we'll touch on some of those broader dimensions of cybersecurity here during this conversation. It's really around trust at the end of the day. It's defining what the business needs in order to trust access to its assets,
Mhm.
including its network and systems. But it's also understanding the connectors to that, this third-party vendors, suppliers. It's a host of other aspects of the
Yeah.
business, and cyber is one dimension of how we secure and protect the business from threats.
When you say threats, I think most people, and myself included, when I hear cybersecurity, I'm always thinking keeping the bad guys out from your
Right.
information, right? But there's also the portion of making sure that the right people have the right information at the same time. So it's not all about keeping the bad guys out. It's also about letting the good guys in, right?
Exactly. A big part of our understanding of cyber today involves the realization that data is valuable, right?
Yeah.
Information is valuable in the right hands, but it's also valuable to people who are using it for the wrong reasons or maliciously. And it's the value of the data that has really increased the awareness of cybersecurity. And I think more than anything, when I'm talking with business analyst professionals, I really start out talking about risk. I think risk at the end is really the language that we should focus on. It's also the language of business executives. They
Mhm.
want to know what risk are we accepting and what risks do we need to take. And cybersecurity is really a response to the risk. And as we know, businesses need to take risks. Some of them, startups, for example, have to take enormous risks. Cybersecurity at that point becomes an enabler. It's the ability to understand what is most at risk and then how to protect that as opposed to trying to protect everything. Data and information largely being the focus of that conversation.
I love that you mentioned data because data is a big element of, cybersecurity. And like you said, over the years, data is more at the forefront for a lot of organizations. So how would you say that cybersecurity has evolved over the past decade or so now that these threats have become more sophisticated?
I think evolution is the right term. Cyber has evolved. I'm thinking back to 10 or 15 years ago. Cybersecurity wasn't even really a term or a concept or a profession, right? We talked about vulnerabilities and threats. There were conversations about malware and viruses, and most security experts at that time were involved with firewalls, protecting perimeters from intrusion, from threats and vulnerabilities. Today, cybersecurity is a broad
Yeah.
conversation, right? The perimeters expanded almost exponentially when we moved to the cloud. And firewalls are still very much in use, but there are many different kinds and they serve different purposes. But along with that, I think we evolved from this castle wall approach, right? Protect what's inside,
Mhm.
to understanding that new capability, that new ability to protect what's sensitive and valuable is really around identity and encryption. That's like the new firewall. It's identity and
Yeah.
trust, right? Or zero trust, as the framework that many of us have now learned or heard, right? The zero trust architecture, and then encryption, right? How do we prevent access to very important or confidential proprietary information and through encryption? And that becomes one of the foundations of cybersecurity controls,
Yeah.
right? So it has evolved tremendously.
Yeah.
There's identity access, there's network systems, application security, DevSecOps, right? I saw a map once on LinkedIn. Somebody had drawn a map, what do you call it, a word bubble map of
Mm,
cybersecurity. And
like a
there were
mind
over
map.
200 different domains.
Oh,
So when you
wow.
think I can work in cyber, and it's like, wow, it's like I work in a zoo with animals. It was,
Right. It's crazy when you see that. It's like, first of all, am I ever going to be using all of these elements or perspective of cybersecurity? Hopefully not. But
right.
also, just working as a business analyst, I can recall a time where we just talked about cybersecurity for like a second, back in the day, towards the end of a project, and now it's like it's something that needs to be discussed throughout the life cycle, the project life cycle, because it's that important.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that should be top of mind from earlier on in the project versus just thinking about it at the tail end. So
As a business analyst working in and around development of a project, initiative, software, application, integration, even the discussion around what do we need to secure and what do we secure it with or by,
yeah,
and having those cyber people in the room at the very beginning, even in those early design conversations
yeah,
up front, you can't bolt security on anymore. That's not
right.
possible.
Yes.
Projects have learned now and I've been on projects where we try to bolt security on after, right? It's like, well, no, now we need to secure, do some threat modeling, if you will,
Hmm.
and like, well, no, you have to rebuild that whole application to make it secure. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, but how much have we spent? It's like, well, that doesn't matter, right?
Right.
Matters is
Exactly.
how much risk are you accepting, and what are you going to lose if it's not secured? It's like that's sunk costs. So a lot of organizations or businesses and certainly development teams now are shifting more toward automated technologies to scan code while you're writing it or after you've put it into a code base, right?
Hmm.
And then scan that for vulnerability. So a lot of that shift left mentality has
Right.
certainly come to the forefront, right? Let's shift cyber left
Right.
to the beginning of the project, even in those initial conversations, so
Yeah.
that we're not adding that cost because the cost to add security later is significantly more expensive.
Terry, can you just give us a little bit of a walkthrough of your journey into cybersecurity as a business analyst and how those two work areas or domains intersect, business analysis and cybersecurity?
Thank you. When I reflect on that, I think a lot of people assume that you get into cyber through the technology door, and I think um, for a lot of us that are working in cyber, either as business analysts or some other adjacent role, we've come into this role from a lot of different doorways, if you will. I learned dating back quite a ways. I learned a lot about information security serving as a airman in the U.S. Air Force,
Oh,
SAC Command. There, you're indoctrinated very quickly into information security, right? Everything is classified. Every document you read is
right,
classified. It's
right.
classified as whether anybody can read it or is it top secret. And I actually had top secret clearance. So I did get to see documents that were top secret. Now, as a chef, for B-52 bomber pilots, some of that top secret classified information were the grocery lists for our pilots. Not everyone needs to know what our pilots eat for dinner, but
Right.
that idea of information security, I picked up on that very early in my career. I worked for a number of years in the film and music business. And we transitioned during that time that I was working in the industry, where all films were made in 35 millimeter film and edited. And during my 6 or 8 years in the business, we transitioned to digital. And so, very often, a topic of conversation was digital rights digital media rights and encryption.
Yeah.
And suddenly now anything could be copied. Think about Napster, anybody who's around during those days. There was a lot of copying, pirating of music. And so recognizing that intellectual rights, intellectual properties should be protected.
Yeah.
And we need controls to do that. We need governance around that. And cybersecurity is just an extension of that. I
Mhm.
worked for a healthcare industry and as a program director serving street youth and populations of vulnerable people. I learned a lot about what can happen if information, personally identifying information, is released.
Yeah.
Um, I had documentation that was actually entered into evidence in courts, in the legal systems, and recognizing that information is very powerful and evidence is can change lives, right? And so, well before viruses and malware and the concept of firewalls and threat detection were part of my language, I had already been adopting and understanding a model and a framework of how information needs to be protected and what the conditions or the use cases are around that. And
Mhm.
that model very easily into a cybersecurity framework or mindset, right? That what you share or what you have you in the wrong hands or for the wrong purposes can be misused,
Yeah.
and in some cases maliciously or dangerously. It can affect lives.
Yeah.
So for me, that journey has been a lifelong journey, and the transition into cybersecurity was a long and gradual journey where working directly with cybersecurity operations teams, with threat analysis, threat detection tools and capabilities, naturally moved into that world.
So, as a business analyst, how would you describe or what would you say are the day-to-day responsibilities of a business analyst working in a cybersecurity environment or maybe a cybersecurity project?
I think of business analysis and the profession of business analysis and cybersecurity really in three dimensions. And I think that first dimension we might commonly refer to as cyber hygiene. That's simply the awareness that information, that data, that network and systems and reputation must be protected, and
Mhm.
that there's risk when it's unprotected, right? And that risk is something that we have to quantify. So I would say that in general speaking, every business analyst or every BA must have some awareness of cyber hygiene,
Wow.
simply understanding the importance of passwords and some of the concepts that go with password hacking, brute force hacking, DDoS
Mhm.
attacks, and what that means just on a personal level, professional level, for your family, right? They come to you, right? You mentioned cybersecurity, and right away, no, I played a doctor on a TV show. I'm not a doctor, right? I work with some cybersecurity people, but I'm not a cybersecurity professional. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't do that. But I think that all BAs really need to have an understanding of cybersecurity hygiene,
Yeah.
right? Know how to detect phishing and smishing, knowing how to protect yourself from simple vulnerabilities. I use the metaphor of leaving your credit card sitting out, right? I guarantee you someone's going to borrow that.
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
same with your work environment. Make sure that you maintain a clean and secure environment. Make sure that your passwords, don't reuse passwords for two or three different accounts.
Right.
Make sure that you're using password protection. So that's level one, right? Cyber hygiene. All BAs need to do that. And then there's the business analyst who's providing security requirements, who
Mhm.
understands that security requirements are part of that overall. They're not non-functional requirements anymore. As we talked, they're requirements. They're required in order to secure whatever the initiative. So there's the
Yeah.
awareness of what are the security requirements, what are security controls that we need to put in place for whatever the initiative, software, application we're developing or migrating or maturing. And I would put that into the context of understanding cybersecurity capabilities.
Mm.
So identity and access management is a set of capabilities. Intrusion detection and prevention is a set of cybersecurity capabilities. So we're moving from hygiene into a concept of what are the cyber capabilities we need to secure the things that we're working on, discussing, or needing to protect, right? Data security, network security, infrastructure security. They all use different kinds of capabilities. So,
Mhm.
as a business analyst, you're not going to know all those, but what you can do, and this is where I think this is brilliant, the most important role, the everyday role of the BA is translating those cyber capabilities into a business language
Yeah,
that helps the business folks understand why are we doing this? Why are we investing this? Why is this taking so long? Right? That type of thing. It's well, we need to do the threat modeling. And with that, we can protect our systems from a really rapidly evolving threat landscape. And now with AI augmenting those threat actors, right? You put it back into the business language and you say, right now the risks are really high.
yeah,
We release something like this, and we're really vulnerable, right? And here's where it gets really expensive. And what are we trying to protect, right? If that gets released, or if that gets lost, or if that gets corrupted, put it back in the business language and help them understand the cost, the investment, but most importantly, the value that comes with it.
yeah.
That's the second. The third dimension is actually working in cyber, and that's actually working alongside the cyber analysts, the cyber architects, cyber engineers, developing those capabilities, investing in solutions to mature cybersecurity capabilities. To me, that's where you start to become a lot more of a technical expert in the domains of identity and access management, data network and infrastructure protection, and now you become embedded in that organization as somebody who shares a similar mindset, a cybersecurity mindset. But you're bringing business analysis to help write the business cases. The engineers, the architects, the operations teams, they don't have time to mature these capabilities and these services. It's up to the business analysts to help them in that context. So the everyday role of the business analyst in that context is actually providing the development capabilities, the business case writing, the management working alongside either project managers or product owners to mature or integrate or bring in new cyber technology.
Mm.
So again, that's like three ways of looking at it, if that makes sense.
No, I think that's actually really helpful. So from what I gather, you said the hygiene, um, the capabilities, is that how you labeled it?
It's
Yeah.
understanding the capabilities. Which capabilities do our solutions need, right? And
Yeah.
then translating that to business language, right? You're the liaison between the cyber, the data security, the information security, and the business. What are they asking for? What do they need, right? They need
Yeah.
to move fast. They're talking marketing, they're talking customer value, right? They're
Hmm.
talking customer
Hmm.
experience, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're focused on. They need to go fast. They need to do that, need to do it well. They need to increase revenue, right? And you're
Right.
talking, can't talk cyber. You have to
Right.
talk risk
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
mitigating that. So the customers have expectations now,
Yeah.
right? It's not
Correct.
just a
Correct.
regulatory expectation that we're secure. Customers expect that you're managing their data securely, appropriately, right?
Yeah.
And helping business understand that's how we're doing it, right? We're this team or these groups of people or these capabilities are enabling what the customers are now expecting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope that kind of help because I think there are three different ways of viewing that role of the BA in and around cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I definitely think the level that you might be on can heavily depend on your organization as well. Some
Oh yeah,
organizations are a lot more technically savvy or, just intentional about cyber, right?
that's correct.
And I also like some of the things you said. It's like it's the things that we're already doing. So, like, for example, when we're doing data flow diagrams and we're trying to identify data flows, we need to be more intentional about identifying sensitive data or sensitive areas
Yeah.
that might be a potential threat that we need to address, right?
That's a
Intention.
classic case right there. If you are already doing data flow diagramming or application mapping, you've already created the groundwork for threat modeling.
Yeah.
And so you can expand into that. I've worked with a group of BAs. We brought them in, trained them, brought in cyber experts to help with threat modeling. And that's essentially looking at what point in the data flow is there a vulnerability or an opportunity for a threat actor or for a vulnerability to be exploited.
Yeah.
And with not within very much time, the BAs were doing the threat modeling. They
Yeah.
understood what capabilities were necessary. We're talking about encryption and we're talking about um, firewall. We're talking a variety of different cyber capabilities, and there's just a small set of them. So
Yeah.
the BAs now they understand. Oh, right, that's where this applies. So they're taking that application or that data flow diagram and applying threat modeling to it. And so we're shifting left, right? Everybody shifted left, which is
Yeah.
brilliant. Again,
Love
that the maturity of the organization depends the level of risk
it. Yeah.
or data assets that they need to protect and a variety of other things, right? But that's one great example. I'm glad you brought that up.
So we talked about the business analyst role and responsibilities, and we know that we're probably doing some cybersecurity work in our requirements without even realizing it. Can you highlight some of those areas where we might already be delving into cybersecurity without even realizing that that's what it is?
Yeah, and it isn't just connecting the work we do to cyber. I think when we as business analysts are thinking about the customer, the end user, what is it? What is it they need? What is it they're going to get? What is the value, the proposition in there? And really surprisingly, I think it's trust. We need them to trust what we're delivering. And there are deliverables, right? Or there's outputs and outcomes. And I think this is the mindset of a good BA with a cyber mentality is can we trust the outputs?
Hmm.
Can we trust them enough to put them in the hands of the customer? Be ensured that our reputation is on the line, but it can be trusted. So if we think about it from the outputs to the outcomes,
Yeah.
what are the outcomes we're expecting?
Yeah.
If we know what the outcomes are, right? An application with a report on the end, or a marketing card, a sales application with a shopping cart, right? Uh, the outcome is I can find and select a product or a service. I
Hmm.
can then put it in a shopping cart for right now or for later, right? Those are the outcomes are the experiences that the customer is expecting or
Yeah.
looking for,
Yeah.
right? Those are the measurable outcomes. So thinking as a BA, you're thinking outcomes. You're asking the question, what are the outcomes, right?
Yeah.
What's the business value? Here,
Yeah.
that's us, right? The technical side we're going to get to in a minute. But if
Right.
I don't really understand what do you expect as an outcome for that customer? What are you promising the customer? Right? Let's talk about it as a promise. You
Right.
promise that you can do this for them. Can they trust you? Okay, now let's carry that trust back into the chain. So if we
Hmm.
know what the outcomes are, we know the promise, we know the outcomes, what are the outputs?
Yeah.
What are the system outputting?
Yeah.
Can I trust that? Can I measure it? What is the
Right.
measurability? Now, what are the inputs that have to be processed? What is the trustworthiness, the integrity, the confidentiality, the availability, the CIA Triad? You'll hear that whenever we're talking cyber, you're going to hear somebody mention the CIA Triad. That's confidentiality, integrity of the data, and the availability. Right? If it's not available, it's not serving a purpose. But how do we make it available? That's through authorization and authentication, right? That's that part. So those are the inputs. And a cyber mindset is how can we validate and ensure the trustworthiness of those inputs to ensure the promise?
Okay.
And you don't need to know anything about firewall rules or which ingress egress identity management system we're using, but you're already thinking along the same lines as a cyber person because you're thinking, what are the threats? What are the threats? Where are we vulnerable
Yes.
in that flow from inputs to promise?
Wow. Can you repeat for the CIA Triad? What are those?
The C is confidentiality. I is the integrity. So we think about confidentiality. That really describes the fact that not all information is available to everybody. That certain information is restricted, and
Yeah.
that we need controls and classification, a type of classification to know what information can be revealed or surfaced and to whom.
Yeah.
Integrity, right? Integrity. Let me talk about your checking account. Let's
Yeah.
hope that the data is has a lot of integrity around it, right? You don't want
Yeah.
people meddling in there, right? So integrity describes really the authenticity of the data to ensure that no one can go in there and meddle with it, right?
Yeah.
Only authorized systems should change data in a
Yeah.
production system, right? Not people. There should be no people editing production data, right? So how
Yeah.
do we preserve the integrity of the data? What are the controls we put in place to
Yeah.
ensure that no unauthorized activity can change, delete, or modify data? And
Yeah.
then, of course, availability, right? Every cybersecurity expert knows the best solution to secure data. You
Mhm.
lock it in a closet, turn off the lights, and throw away the key. There, that
Yeah.
is secured data, right?
No.
But now it has no value.
Right.
So availability really talks about the value of data. It isn't just the confidentiality or the classification around who can use it. It's how do we make it available to those who are authorized to use that
Mhm.
information or that data. And those are the cybersecurity, it's the triad, it's called, of
Right.
cybersecurity. We have to ensure confidentiality, ensure integrity, and ensure availability,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That I have to ensure that as a cybersecurity person, that's the hardest one.
When I go back, I think about when I'm doing non-functional requirements, like you mentioned earlier, that may no longer be non-functional, but I think about, like availability is one of the major, non-functional requirements as far as like, any compliance licensing that we might have. So I might be facilitating with developers or security people, but I'm not thinking of it as
Yeah,
cybersecurity. I'm just thinking of it as getting access
the
to the
people who
product.
need it. Yep.
So,
How do we get the system to access to it, and which
yeah,
system should access it? What are the service accounts?
right.
Because oftentimes we're talking, you've got dev environments, QA, test, pre-prod, prod
Yes.
environments, right?
Right.
Let's not forget that. And what data is in there, right? So when we're
Mhm.
talking about confidentiality, I can't have confidentiality in a dev system, right? I can't have confidential data in there. It has to be obfuscated or masked or not at
Yeah.
all, right? Made up pseudo anonymized data. That's We're thinking cybersecurity, but that's not what we're thinking.
That's not
We're
what
just
we're
thinking
thinking.
common sense.
Exactly. And one of my favorite things to do for the development team is doing like a CRUD matrix where we're assigning the role-based access, right? Because I want to work with the business to see what they need versus just letting the developers figure it out, right? So
That's
I want to
smart.
make sure that everybody is clear. This role should be doing this. They should have these capabilities
That's
versus
right.
saying these are the roles, but you figure out what their functionalities are,
You
capabilities are
got
for
it.
the app,
You
right?
got it. That's a great use of a BA technique too, the CRUD analysis and
Absolutely.
role-based access, right? Not everybody is using that, and it's a challenge, and it's a risk, right? If I'm assigning access based upon who you are and not what you do, then I have to do that for
Yeah.
every single person, and
Yeah.
I can't afford it. I simply can't afford that anymore. There's another area called attribute-based access controls. And that's based on the data, right? If we classify the data, then I can define who or what role can access that data, right? It's not just in a container, but it's at the data level. It's at the attribute level. And so you can expand that matrix out to include in what data or what field on a record
Yeah.
should be exposed to that role, right? And so you can extend that very technique
Yeah.
down into the attribute level. So those of you who are looking at a database, but not all that data should be available to everyone. What are the ways or techniques? And that's an area within access controls that your company may invest in, or you may already be doing it. And that's how that functions.
Yeah. So I think I know the answer, but would you say that cybersecurity is a part of every project, or at least every software project?
If it's not, you're exposing some risk
Mhm.
without realizing it. Yeah, I literally cannot think of any project today that shouldn't involve cybersecurity controls, risk assessments, auditing, and general access,
Yeah.
right? It's those, and all of those things fall within that domain of infosec or information security, cybersecurity. Right? All of those things are related.
It's hard to even find a product or a tool that you don't have to have a login for, right? Like
Exactly.
first thing in order to
Yeah.
even get in.
Yep.
So
You have to authenticate, right? So there's
yes.
the concepts of authenticating and authorizing, two
Yeah.
big terms within cyber. Authenticate is who you are, and I guarantee who you are, and
Yeah.
authorize is and what can you do while you're here? What can you see or do while you're here? So those two concepts are very important to understand as a business analyst. Is can we authenticate you? Otherwise, you're just a guest. I
Right,
don't really know who
exactly.
you are, right? You're a visitor. I don't know who you
Exactly.
are. But if I can authenticate you, then I can know more about you, and I can probably offer you more access to
Yes.
things. So the more authenticated you are, and then we get into what's called MFA, multi-factor authentication. And now we all have on our phones our
Yeah.
authenticator app, right? And that's just to further authenticate who you really are. Can I truly trust you that you say you are who you say you are? Now
Right.
I can grant you access to very privileged information or systems.
Absolutely.
Again, that's capability, right? That's in that
Yeah.
capability domain of cyber. That's beyond hygiene. That's getting
Yes.
into awareness of why do we have that capability?
So that's level two. So we got hygiene, cyber capability, and working in cyber as level three, right? Back to those three
You
levels.
got it.
In terms of, and I think you mentioned this a little bit in level three, in terms of the biggest knowledge gap between business analysts and the technical or the cybersecurity teams, what's our key role in bridging that gap? Oh, what do you think that gap is?
The From a cyber perspective, every year, every quarter, the cyber team has to go to business and ask for funding.
Mm,
And cybersecurity is viewed as a cost center. They're not producing anything,
mm,
right? They're an
mhm.
expense. And that's really hard for cyber organizations to go to business every quarter, every year, whenever whatever the funding cycle is, and say,
Yeah.
we need X dollars. And the business is like, for what? Right?
Mhm.
What are you giving me? What am I getting for this investment? That's huge. A business analyst, perfect role. Again, because a business analyst sitting in the middle, the liaison between business, what do we need to generate revenue? What do we need to do to optimize or reduce expenses? What do we need to do to mitigate risks,
Yeah.
reduce those risks, right? That's what the business is thinking about. That's their language.
Hmm.
Cybersecurity is like, we got to protect all this stuff, right? We got to
Yeah.
make sure that no one can get to it,
Right.
and that it can't be misused, and that hackers don't get in and we're not ransomed, right? Because it's hugely expensive. So cyber oftentimes uses fear to
Yeah.
drive funding, and the business analyst needs to turn that around. And I'll ask you this question: do you know why they put brakes on cars. As we think, right, it's to stop the car,
Yeah,
right?
to
We
stop the
brakes to
car.
stop the car. There was the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer from JP Morgan, in a conversation about 10 years ago or so, mentioned this story. And he says, yeah, I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to say the reason they put brakes on cars is so they can go faster.
Oh, okay. I get it. I get it.
Think about that. And what are the controls that we put in place? We put guardrails, road signs, dotted lines, curves, stoplights, right? Those are controls that enable us to drive safely and securely. That is what cyber should be. They should
Yeah.
be the brakes on cars so that when cyber goes to the business and says, I need this funding, they should be able to say, in order to protect these very valuable assets, so
Hmm.
that you can go faster, so that you can
Hmm.
take your risks safely and securely, knowing that if you have to pivot, cyber will pivot equally and protect that system or those assets or that availability as you need it.
Yeah.
Suddenly, cybersecurity becomes a business, and not suddenly, but it's the idea that cyber is now a business enabler. We can help you take risks faster and more securely, more safely. That is the gap, is helping business understand that cyber is actually an enabler for the
Hmm.
business. And for cyber to stop the fear mongering of the hackers are coming, right? The orcs are coming and they're going to steal everything and they're going to ransom us. It's yes, but we know which things to protect, which things to monitor more securely. And not
Yeah.
everything needs to be secured at the same level. You're helping us prioritize where we invest your money to protect the things that are most valuable or the things that require the most level of security so that you can go faster and take the risks that are necessary.
Yeah.
That to me is the role of the BA, is to be in that middle to help both understand the value of each,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
to share in an understanding of what really each one is trying to accomplish.
How do you think that business analysts can contribute to that deeper? Like, what steps or techniques do you think we can use to contribute to that?
Again, I think the very first step is just general hygiene,
Hmm.
awareness of
Hmm.
where the threats are and what
Yeah.
a vulnerability is,
Yeah.
understanding the risk calculus. What is
Yeah.
risk, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Most of the VAs that I train and work with in cyber, we bring them in. We start around risk. We start with that conversation around identifying risk, and the BABOK has a whole section on risk assessment, risk analysis.
Yeah.
Be aware of risk management framework. Get
Yeah.
to know that because the what we're always all cybersecurity is trying to minimize or treat risk, trying to control the impact of a threat exploiting a vulnerability.
Yes. Absolutely.
So then we move. So when you understand risk and we can identify what's the really it's understanding what's the impact. If
Yeah.
this threat actually did exploit that vulnerability, what could
Absolutely.
be the impact? And let's quantify it. Let's say that
Yeah.
this database, I want to know how long can you live without the data in this database? Tell me
Yeah.
what happens after 15 minutes. Tell me
Yeah.
what happens after an hour. Tell me what happens after 8 hours. Tell me
Right.
what happens after 24 hours, right? So let's quantify the impact. That's risk assessment or risk analysis,
Yeah.
right? That's one
Absolutely.
way to frame it. Now, let's move into the cyber part of that. What are the controls we put in place to
Hmm.
minimize the impact, to
Right.
reduce the risk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And quantifying that around the cyber capabilities, right?
Yeah.
So apply your business analysis. You get a toolbox. You can do modeling, all kinds of interesting modeling. Get to know
Yeah.
frameworks, right? The BABOK has a framework. It's a brilliant one. There are cyber frameworks that you should become familiar with. You really need to understand, if nothing else, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and
Okay.
why that exists and how
Okay.
that's beneficial to modeling cybersecurity and having a language between business, infrastructure, and cybersecurity.
All right. And what is NIST? Uh, do you know what that?
National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a U.S. non-governmental agency, really developing all sorts of standards across various industries.
Yeah.
And so we think of NIST Cybersecurity Framework. It used to be called NIST 800-53. There's also the NIST Risk Management Framework, and they
Okay.
go hand in hand, right? Going to
Gotcha.
do what you read them, but just be familiar with it. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to know. You don't have to take an exam, right? You don't have to study for it, and but be aware of it, and that gets you a conversation at the table. If you can mention that risk the management framework from NIST, they'll actually invite you to the table. Have a
Oh,
seat.
nice.
Let's talk.
Awesome. That's good to know. Thank you for that. One of the things that I always think about is I love process mapping. But I think in this scenario, we can be really beneficial by identifying those handoffs, right? When it's going from one
Yes.
person to the next, right? And that's going to be where the vulnerability steps in, right? So the ability to do that, but and definitely to, I think, like you said earlier, to quantify the if this risk
Yeah.
materializes, what that impact's going to look like.
Yeah.
Or
And that process mapping, if you're just talking about an application that as a user who logs in, right, that credential is passed to a credential store, and then it's probably hashed, right? And what does that mean? How long does a token last? What's a token for, right?
yeah,
Having some understanding. So every one of those pieces is a control and a vulnerability if
yeah,
it's exploited, right? And so when you're doing that process mapping, a handoff of of an identity or a token or an authorization, an access license, right? What are those steps? And just in everyday life, right? You go to the grocery store and there's a whole section of food there, and but there's another section of the store that not everyone can go in, and that's where they sell liquor, right?
yeah,
There's alcohol, right? You got to come in with an ID, right? So that's just one version of a control, and it might not be cyber, oh, but in a way it really is because
yeah,
it's boundaries, trust boundaries. We're
right.
establishing trust boundaries. So
Yeah.
that's that handoff I think that you're talking about is what
Hmm.
are those trust boundaries? At what moment do I need to trust? Right.
Yeah.
And putting it in that language, business starts to understand that better than a threat modeling capability where we're talking about hashing and pseudonymization, yeah, whatever data obfuscation. That's not gonna land anywhere in the room. It's gonna crawl out somewhere and spell for a while. You say, oh, we can't trust it right there. It's like, oh, wow. Then what can we do to trust it?
Absolutely. So trust and we know risk. So we know that risk is a big part of all of this, right? And I think for most business analysts, we might initially think about data risk. But what other domains of risk do you think that we should be familiar with?
And part of that will depend on whatever line of business or enterprise or operations institution you're involved with.
Hmm.
Education. Let's take education for a minute. All right. So information is valuable. Information is also confidential. I have a college student, and when she was in high school, at a certain age, I can view her records, her school records, but at a
Hmm.
certain age, I cannot. Right?
Okay.
There are regulatory obligations held by schools in order to protect that information. Now, as a parent, I think, oh, I should be able to see her grades. That
Yeah.
is absolutely not the case, right? I
Mhm.
need to ask for her permission, and she needs to sign that permission. So there's an example of what is the risk of an institution that allows non-authorized people to view data records.
Yeah.
It's huge, big fines. So that's one.
Absolutely.
I work for an insurance company, enterprise risk, but we're talking risk at scale. And so for an insurance company, I'm surrounded by actuaries. and they speak
Oh,
the language of risk. They invented the language of risk,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so they have a very different, very powerful lexicon of risk, which they describe. And so there's different kinds of risk. Obviously, there's reputational risk. We
yeah.
think back to 2013, Target, a big company here in the US,
Mhm.
was breached. And sadly, it was breached just a few weeks before Christmas, and their books had just turned from red to black, and they were really excited. And the board had gone home for the holidays,
Oh
and
man.
Target had to call the board members and say, "We have a very serious problem."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, what could that possibly be?" They find out that 60 million of your clients' credit cards have been stolen, right? Huge reputation. That was the bell ringer. That was the first time when a corporation's board member was brought up and said, "You failed us," and let
Yeah.
them go. Suddenly, cybersecurity was no longer a problem of technology. It was a
Yeah.
problem for the board. That's
Hmm.
risk, and
Yeah.
they knew it. And since then, we have seen countless, an untold number of cyber threats that have damaged companies' reputations. We've seen companies go out of business. It's really sad. So
Yeah.
that where risk matters, it's really all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Lots of different kinds of risks that we should be aware of. So
Yeah.
everything from the risk of somebody gaining access to something that they probably shouldn't have, to nation state actors now going after utilities, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right? Think about the level of risk if a community no longer has clean water.
Oh
That's
man.
enormous risk,
Yeah.
right? And so who's responsible? Who is responsible for ensuring the integrity of those systems, the confidentiality of the networks, the data within there, and then making sure it's still available, right? So that we can operate. So
Yeah.
risk is an enormous part of that conversation. It's part of every cyber discussion.
You're right. I came from a background of banking and mortgage, and we always had new regulations, new compliance laws, and things like that. We constantly, everybody, not just the people in compliance, but it's just like everyone who worked in the organization needed to know these things because that impacted our business rules, which is how,
100%.
guided the work that we do. So it's definitely
Yep.
something that we all need to be keen on. All right. So, Terry, you have been a business analyst working in cybersecurity. How would you distinguish that role from an actual cybersecurity analyst? Is there overlap?
When we think about it from those three levels, the BA who's basically aware of cybersecurity hygiene and doing maintaining good hybrid cyber hygiene is important.
Hmm.
The next one is being able to work in and around cyber, applying capabilities that matter, doing some basic threat modeling in that.
Hmm.
As we move into working directly or alongside cyber, where I'm actually helping them write run books, where I'm helping them write playbooks around a cyber operation, around actual threat detection and threat
Yeah.
management. Um, there, I'm playing the role of the business analyst. I'm helping to document, I'm helping to trace requirements, I'm
Yeah.
helping to understand and write that in a way that's meaningful and impactful, that it's transportable, that it's sustainable. Understanding some of the techniques, some of their capabilities is helpful. I'm trying to think of a good analogy, right? I'm not a pilot, but if I have to help a pilot write a manual or a process, right? I'm going to do a process, a training documentation. That's a
Yeah.
classic case where a business analyst can be really helpful. These folks don't have time to do that business analysis stuff, right?
Yes.
They
Right.
really don't. I don't want them to. They're trained to monitor for threats, to behave and act immediately and instantaneously to protect our environments, to build really sophisticated, complicated, integrated SIM systems
Yeah.
that are monitoring logs at an alarmingly fast rate to detect a simple intrusion. Right? That's what I want them to focus on. But they
Yeah.
need to train other people. They need to communicate. They need to integrate. Right. So part of the role of the BA, right? Just some of our new ones that we will bring in, we'll put them in the SOC. We'll actually have them work overnight, a few nights with the
Yeah.
SOC team, so that they're hearing and listening to the language, and they're watching. And this is the most boring job in the world too. It's like being a fireman, right?
Yeah.
You're working for the fire department, right? There is nothing to do for days and weeks on end, but then
Yeah.
suddenly, right?
Yeah.
It's suddenly, and you don't want that to ever happen, but you hope that your BA will experience that moment because it's insane, right? It is absolutely insane. Just like fighting a fire, there's no way you can describe it.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's the integration part, right? Where we bring in technologies. We need BAs who can help integrate technologies,
Hmm.
right? To do the processing around the project management, the timing, and the all the processes that need to be brought in, all the stakeholders. You got to bring all the right stakeholders in to talk about that. I don't want a cyber engineer doing that, right? I
Yeah.
don't need a cyber engineer, my main threat detector who worked for the FBI for 12 years, in a room talking about project management, right? No, no.
Right.
Whereas the BA is absolutely in the middle of that
Yeah.
conversation. So to
Yeah.
me, that is a great opportunity again
Yeah.
for the BA to play that bridge role.
Absolutely. It almost sounds like just to be doing due diligence as a general business analyst for most projects, you should be at least at a level one. And
Yep.
then if you're in a more cybersecurity environment or cyber focused,
If you're
then
doing any development work, any modeling,
yeah,
application or software development,
yeah,
even SaaS integration, you should know who your cyber teams are. Your architect is probably operating around a permit to build capability, right? You're not
yeah,
going to release something into a dev environment until your cyber team has investigated it, until
yeah,
they've signed off, right? You should
yeah,
already know who they are, what those requirements are, understand why, and translate that back. So if you're doing any type of application software development work, vulnerability management, threat management, if you're working with software, vulnerabilities are detected hourly, minute by minute,
hmm,
and having some understanding, what is a vulnerability assessment? What does that mean? Right?
yeah,
And how do we mitigate it? How long do we have to mitigate it? What does the business need to understand? Right? What can I tell the business to help them understand why this is important and why that time frame matters? Right? And
right,
then what are the risks again? Right? If we don't, right,
right,
help them understand. So that's that. Again, a business analyst role. You don't have to understand, right? The eyes on glass. You don't have to wear a hood, one of those hoodies hiding your face. To say I
right,
work in cyber. Oh no,
yeah,
no, you don't need that, right? You just say no, no. We need to patch that system, and here's why. Or you can say we can't actually patch that system, right? We don't own it,
right,
um, but we've identified a vulnerability. Well, who are the stakeholders you need to get in the room now? Right? Go do that job. Go find those stakeholders and bring them in the room and then understand, so what are the compensating controls? If we don't own that system, if it's a packaged system and we can't patch it, but there's a vulnerability, who are the people we need in the room right now?
right.
Right? Do that. Do that. That's amazing.
And that's a perfect segue into my next question. So, when we're working in these cybersecurity projects, who are the key subject matter experts that we should be working with?
Let's start with the product owner, right? Someone who truly cares about whatever the outputs are, right?
Hmm.
Whatever the outcomes, right? I want to know, what are the outcomes we're talking about? Because if we don't understand the outcomes, it's going to be hard for us to focus on what is it we're really trying to accomplish.
Hmm.
I think that's your number one stakeholder. Who owns the outcomes? They're the only ones who are going to be able to decide whether or not what we're talking about is realistic and that it matters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So make sure you understand that you've got the people who own the outcomes and the promise in the room, right? That's your number one stakeholder. They're the deciders, they're
yeah,
the decision makers.
yeah.
Then you need to have folks who understand, how did we get here, right? What is it that we got here? Sometimes that's your architect, sometimes it's a solution architect or a solution engineer, right? It's some of those folks who can answer the question of how we got here, because sometimes that matters, right? And
Mhm.
everybody's got an opinion about
Yeah,
that. Now, when we're thinking about it from a risk perspective, somebody who has actually can talk the language of risk, they're very important. And oftentimes those you're auditing people who sit somewhere in audit, and they're
Mhm.
amazing. They're very helpful, and they
Yeah.
can help you understand what were the controls that should have been in place or that are in place but are no longer providing that control capability, right? So there's that. Now, I'm not talking specific roles, right? Yet, but I am describing a little bit higher
I
level.
love them.
Abstract that
Mhm.
one level so that why do we have these people in this room?
Right.
What role are they serving, right? Somebody who designed the application or the solution, who knows about it, right? Who can speak about how can we fix it or how can we introduce some process or some capability to fix it, if you will, or
Yeah.
understand it, or get rid of it, right? Maybe today's the day where we decide to retire it. This is the fifth time, right, or whatever that is, right? Who can
Yeah.
speak to that? And then, of
Right.
course, if it's really cyber related, if it's a cyber control related thing, then it's identifying what capability and who in your cyber security and risk organization can speak to that capability, right?
Yeah.
So having some awareness again of that broad scope of the dimensions of cybersecurity will help.
That's a great landscape for that. I was also thinking like even if you have like vendors trying to
Oh
get
my
an
goodness
understanding
sakes.
of
Oh yeah,
their
forgive me for, of course. A lot of our solutions now are the vendor platforms, system software. We're licensing it 100%. You have to have some representation. When it gets to be complicated, reach out. Make sure that you've got somebody maybe on the outside. You might have to bring in a managed service provider who can help more broadly integrate or describe the issues or the technologies or capabilities. You might have an identity access management system that isn't really integrated, and you're wondering how do we integrate this with some of these other applications that we have. You might not have in-house resources that can do that. You might have to reach outside. So when you're saying bring the right stakeholders in, and who are they?
yeah.
Sometimes those are outside agents,
Yeah.
right? That you might have to hire, do a contract with, to say we're going to need your help. Just be very clear when you're writing that contract what the expectations are, what are the deliverables, right? And those are the folks in your procurement area, folks who do third-party management. You might have to bring them in as well. It depends upon the size, scale, and scope of the initiative or the issue that you're addressing. But you're right, you can reach far. You might actually need to bring in regulators. I worked in nuclear industry for a while, nuclear propulsion and development. And you have to bring in regulators at the national level
Yeah.
to
Wow.
engage with, right? I
Yeah.
can't interpret all of those regulations, and in our ecosystem today, a technology ecosystem where it says, you must identify everyone who has access to this software, and it's like it lives in a virtualized environment
Yeah.
on a hypervisor unit, and I've got 16 IP addresses. What do you mean? When you say
Right.
access the system, you need to
Right.
have the regulator in the room or an auditor from an organization in the room who can translate what that means and then write that in defensible language. And that gets us off into more of the governance area, the regulatory governance part of cyber,
Yeah.
right? We can control things, but we really need to be clear in the scope around that. So the stakeholders are going to vary depending upon the size, scale, and scope of the initiative.
All right, so let's talk about some challenges. What would you say are some of the biggest pitfalls or common mistakes that business analysts make when performing cybersecurity analysis?
I think the most common one, and it's all of us, you have a role to play.
Yeah.
Don't assume that you don't just because you don't have a cyber certificate or you're
Right.
not in the cyber room or you're not wearing a hoodie. No,
Yeah.
you belong at the table. Okay. That's the biggest mistake is get get a seat at the table, ask lots of questions. There is no stupid question when it comes to cyber. The costs are too high to miss
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And it's okay to ask questions to learn because if you're coming at it with a real genuine curiosity and a genuine caring for protecting the systems, people and the data of representing your business, then you absolutely can ask any question you need. Go find those folks. Find out if you have a risk register, right?
Hmm.
Ask the
Hmm.
question, where is our risk register? Who maintains that? That's a
Yeah.
great question. What are our cyber policies? Where are they stored? How do I access them? Do we have standards? Do we have technical and cybersecurity standards? Know where they are. Read them.
Yeah.
That's a big mistake if you don't know those things, right?
Yeah.
So it's not so much of a mistake. It's broaden your awareness of the cybersecurity ecosystem in your environment because it permeates everything surprisingly. And the
Hmm.
more you dig in, the more you discover, and the more you find it's integrated everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Your badge when you badge in, uh, anytime you log in, any of those kinds of things, right? There are cybersecurity controls and governance models and frameworks guiding every one of, or God, I hope they are, right? Go find
Yeah.
out what they are.
Yeah.
Understand where your cyber sits and what those frameworks are. What are the principles, the guidance, and the policies, and read them. Become familiar with them. Know where your cyber team sits, right? Get to
Yes.
know them. Yep.
So you talked about like a lack of confidence. Are there any certifications or you mentioned a little bit about frameworks that you would recommend a business analyst to pursue to build that confidence or even credibility in the space?
Absolutely. The IIBA offers a certificate in cybersecurity analysis. You can register for that, and you'll get this huge pamphlet and some videos that would help you. There are many really great learning courses on LinkedIn if you happen to have access to that.
Okay.
Some of the free resources you can Google that around just general or foundational cybersecurity, general and foundational cybersecurity practices. I would Google that. For certification, again, as you move or shift from having general cyber hygiene and awareness
Mhm.
into working with cybersecurity capabilities, right? Expand on your business analysis skills,
Yeah.
right? Be able to write a business case, be able to develop use cases and modeling, look at application and data flow diagramming, and then extend that into Stride, STRID. It's Microsoft's version of threat modeling. Familiarize yourself with that. And then you can extend that. AWS has a number of certifications. There are some Microsoft certifications. Some of them are free, some of them have a cost. Coursera is another place where you can do that. The more advanced, uh, AWS has some advanced cybersecurity. A lot of us are in the enterprise when we're talking working for large companies or corporations.
Mhm.
Our assets are in the cloud, whether it's in Google or AWS or Azure. There are security courses that you can take, right, from those
Mhm.
different platform vendors. Um, Also, NIST, be aware of that. OWASP, if you're working web development, if you're working application or software development, I would
Mhm.
know OWASP. O,
Okay.
and I believe they have some certifications. For those that are sitting in the room, eyes on glass, or your threat modelers or your forensics analysts, right? They
Mhm.
all have what is called the CISSP through ISC squared.
Okay.
Um, that's a very challenging certification path. That's your journey for a cyber engineer, cyber architect. I
Understood.
don't recommend that for business analysts,
Okay.
but please be
Thank you.
aware of that, right? Yeah, no, I have not sat for the CISSP. I have studied for it. I have prepared for it, um, but I haven't found a good enough reason to put myself through that pain and misery
Yeah.
of getting it.
Understood. I
And
get
I
it.
will mention CompTIA has a couple of courses as well, and they're very common. It's probably the most common security certification you can get. It's
Yeah.
CompTIA, and that's in your fundamentals, and then Security Plus.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay, so real quick, I know we talked a little bit about the evolution of cybersecurity in general, but I wanted to specifically touch on AI. So, of course, with the rise of AI and machine learning, how do you think the role of the BA will be changing alongside with these new technologies, or at least things that we should be more familiar with?
Going back to what we've already described, the amazing capabilities that BAs bring is the ability to understand ambiguity, to
Mm,
negotiate, to be the liaison, to
yeah.
interpret. AI can never do those things, no matter
Hmm.
how advanced AI gets. Um, these are things that humans do well,
Yes.
and it's operate within ambiguity. And anytime you're sitting in a room with two other people with two different professions or viewpoints, ambiguity abounds. And
Yeah.
AI doesn't operate well around ambiguity. We do. And
Yeah.
BAs are especially adept at managing ambiguities because we can surface assumptions. We can ask the why.
Yeah.
AI always asks how.
That's awesome.
We're in the room to ask why, and then why again, right?
Yes.
So AI is a very powerful concept in the technologies and agentic
Yeah.
capabilities now. The business analyst is more needed now than ever, I would say.
Yeah. Yes.
So and use AI, please make sure that you're using generative AI to understand
Absolutely.
systems and models. You want
Yeah.
to understand SIM. You've never heard of it before. It's a orchestrator of security logs. Great.
Okay.
I have to go to ChatGPT and say, tell me like a fifth grader what a sim can do.
Yeah.
And in an
Absolutely.
instant, you can become a cybersecurity expert, right? That's pretty cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
Do that. But
Yeah.
don't fear. AI is like anything. It's a very powerful set of tools and capabilities that help
Yeah.
to automate a lot of things, but it automates at scale. And if you have garbage, boy, it's going to automate that garbage at scale.
Garbage in, garbage
And we
out.
talk about trust. AI is taking a lot of information, and believe me, it wants you to trust what it's
Yeah.
outputting. And
Yeah.
as a BA, you're standing outside of the promise.
Hmm.
What is the promise that this solution is supposed to deliver? And as a BA, can you validate that the outcomes are going to support the process? And are the outputs from AI strong enough signal to support the outcomes that business is expecting? That's the role of the BA today. We've evolved. We used to
Yeah.
be requirements gatherers with our buckets and baskets out in the field collecting requirements, right? And tracing
Yeah.
those requirements into the solutions. And then we became change agents, change
Yeah.
management,
Right.
right? Really
Yep.
involved with making sure that we're focused on business value. We're
Absolutely.
evolving again as a profession, and I think that evolution of change agents and change management experts is really moving towards ensuring the
Awesome.
promise of AI, the promise of the delivery, and we're standing at the crossroads today to help business understand how AI can deliver on that promise, but only if we're looking at those inputs with all those eyes from a security perspective, right? From a data management perspective, from a business user, from a customer perspective.
Well, Terry, this has been so enlightening. It really makes me want to, just be more intentional about identifying areas of cybersecurity that I need to be more aware of or take them to the next level. So I'm hoping it's the same for the viewers and the audience here. But for anyone who wants to learn more about you or connect with you, how can they do that?
Today, find me on LinkedIn, Terry
LinkedIn? Okay.
Baresh at LinkedIn. Happy to connect you. We are working on refresh of the IIBA Security Certificate and Analysis. There's a small team. I think we will have a LinkedIn group and a website up fairly soon. Keep you
Awesome.
posted there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, again, Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm hoping this is going to be life-changing for people and maybe save some organizations from security threats.
Thank
So
your cyber teams too, please.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh,
and be curious, be forever curious.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so
absolutely.
much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed talking about the business analyst role in cyber. I don't think
Yeah,
it is as important today as it ever was, and if anything, it's more important today than it
yeah.
ever was. So glad to have more folks engaged in understanding cyber security and awareness. So please uh, dig in and learn as much as you can.
All
Thank you.
right. All right, everybody. Until next time, signing out.